Now.
Best.
So, hey, welcome. Sorry about that. That didn't matter. That didn't count. So, I'm Jess. Welcome. By popular demand, we are today talking about writing for TTRPGs, and I have a fabulous guest who you can now hear, Kristina, Sisto, Kindel. Kristina, why don't you tell us a bit about yourself, what you do?
Sure. Hi, folks. I am a writer and I am a GM. I love writing high fantasy. I love horror, and all things drama. Like, give me your best tragic backstory, and I love it. I love it. I love it so much. So, I worked on titles like I got started with Uncaged Volume 1. You can find my adventure in there. I worked on Book of Seasons. Um, you can find my work in Lost Omens Legends for Pathfinder. And I have been doing some really self indulgent personal projects recently. So, oh, and you can find me GMing on Off the Table, uh, actually wrapping up this Wednesday. So
Heck
that's what I'm doing.
yeah.
How about you, Jess?
I also got started with Uncaged Anthology, which is, I don't know why the captions are only picking up my voice, but you know what? That is enough for this nonsense. So, I will just continue to futz around with that when you're talking. I got started with Uncaged Anthology, and now I write all sorts of stuff, including some stuff for Age of Sigmar Soulbound, some upcoming stuff for Pugmire, and also, like Kristina, a lot of self-indulgent nonsense, and several games that you can play with your cats. So, today we wanted to answer some of your questions about writing, because usually I do DM tips. And I'm glad that you all asked for TTRPG writing advice this time instead. I'm one of the writers for the RPG. Oh, it's not called the RPG Writing Workshop anymore. It's the Storytellers Collective by Scribe Mind. That's what it is. That Ashley Warren does. But so I do have a little bit of experience in teaching that. But also, there's a lot of crossover between DM tips and writing adventures. And honestly, I was kind of running out of DM tips. I don't know how people do like YouTube channels where it's just DM tips for like 60 hours. I could probably do it if I needed to, but wow, it's a lot. So if any of you have questions that you want us to answer about writing, or I guess DMing, drop them in the chat and we'll get to them. But we'll start with some that we got from Twitter, which we're going to start with Kristina's question. I'm going to ask it to you.
Okay, cool.
Where do you like to start when building a world or adventure? What are your favorite parts to plan out, and what are the most challenging?
Okay, well, if we're talking about a world, who wrote this question? It's all over the place. Oh my gosh. Well, if we're talking about a world, it's one thing. If we're talking about an adventure, it's another thing. So I've done most adventures, so let's do adventure. For an adventure, what is the theme of the adventure? What do you want everyone to walk away from the table feeling? Accomplished, frustrated, but happy. You always want people to be happy. And then how can you evoke that throughout the piece? How can you introduce NPCs that make people feel connected? How can you get people engaged in a really cool fight if that's what your players like, or give people options if fighting's really not their jam? How about you? Where do you like to start?
Oh, well, what is your favorite part to write? Like to plan?
I kind of like the details.
Yeah?
I like adding the details at the very end. The creepy little twists. I would say my challenge is actually getting started. Getting started is the hardest part.
Mm-hmm.
Always, every single time. It's so daunting. It's so intimidating. It could be 2 pages, and I'm like, oh my God, where do I start? So, doing one detail, I can do one detail.
Yeah, when Ashley first asked, before I like tackled a lesson at the writers workshop, I wrote one of the pep talks that Ashley sends out, and my idea that I pitched for the pep talk was like just fucking writing, because that is the hardest part for me, and I think a lot of people, is even when you have an idea and you have a deadline, just like making yourself sit down and do it.
Yeah, 100%.
And that's why I think you end up with so many people who are like, I have this whole world specked out and I have like a 600-page book in my head, but I haven't written it down yet. And I'm like, dude, you just got to write like for 10 minutes a day. You know, people say, like, I've been seeing a lot on the Twitter about like, I don't know, 500 words a day or 1,200 words a day. But like, if you have a whole big book in your head and you have nothing on the page, like just write 10 minutes a day. And then when that 10 minutes is up, if you're still in the groove, you don't have to stop, but you can.
Right. And then it's usually going to be you don't want to.
Right.
But those first 10 minutes, those are tough 10 minutes.
They're hard.
Yeah.
Especially if you're like me and your cat likes to shove your laptop out of your lap.
Yes.
I like to start, and this, okay, so this is very different for D&D style, I guess I should say trad games. For trad games, then, and when I say trad games, I mean D&D, Pugmire, Warhammer Fantasy, Age of Sigmar, Pathfinder, which I have not written for, but Kristina has. I like to start with a monster.
Ooh.
I love monsters, and usually it's like, what monster have I not seen, or what monster have I not seen, or what's an aspect of a monster that I want to explore. And I just kind of flip, or what's a way that I have never seen this monster done that I think would be cool. And I start from there, and I like, you know, giving them traits and then kind of building out the adventure or the world around them. It's very different if you're given like a pitch, or if you're assigned a writing thing and they're like, this is what the adventure is going to be about, write it. You know, then I don't get to do that. Occasionally I can't. That's why you'll find a lot of like random cats in my adventures. But yeah, I really like to start with a monster or a monstrous idea and flesh it out.
I like that monstrous idea.
I think most of my ideas are monstrous, at least until, you know, they go through the editor.
Bless the editors.
It's really different for like indie games or any of my self-published stuff, because I do a lot of those for jams, so I'm given a theme, and if it's not for a jam, then it's probably like a shitpost game. Which is still like a playable game, but it's just something where I was like, oh, this sounds like it'll be funny, I'll make this into a game. And some of those I have spent more time on than like actually serious publications. Like I have my free Brave Punishments character builder thing that I made for Fantasy Realism Jam, which was like to raise money for kids with disabilities who in the wake of the backlash to the wheelchair in D&D.
Yeah.
I was like, well, fine, if you want to be a thief or, you know, an assassin or somebody, like, here's what actual medieval court was like the courtroom, and here's some crimes that you might have been tried with, and here's how you survived them if you did. And I put more research into that than I think I have anything else. And it's like a 2-page little free rinky-dink game.
Sometimes, and that's the thing, like you said, sometimes you sit down to write or to research, and then it's 3 hours later, and you're like, what? Okay, cool.
Yeah. Um, the most challenging part for me varies based on the project. Sometimes it's mechanics, but sometimes I can just bang mechanics out in my sleep. I think for me, the most challenging is it's not hard to do, but it's hard to make myself want to do it, and that's system conversions. And
Mm,
just bringing that up because that's something I've had to do a lot of lately. Like, convert something from 3.5 to 5e, or convert something from 5e or a system list, take something that was written system agnostic and put it into a system.
right.
And that's just all mechanics, and it's hard for me to do because I think it's not my stuff. It's not like my like it's not my baby. I'm basically like taking someone else's baby and making it fit a shape.
You're translating.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hmm.
What about you? What's tough for you?
Lore, honestly.
Lore.
Lore, especially if I'm writing for something that I don't know a lot about. And that is usually the case. I don't know a lot of history. I don't know a lot of lore. I don't have years and years and years of knowledge on pretty much any system. I came to gaming as an adult,
Mm-hmm.
um, and it's become a passion, but I was not allowed to have, D&D books when I was a kid. So it's something I know nothing about. Um,
Same, because of God.
yeah, God would be so mad. Whoops.
Yeah, lore's a funny one for me because if I get to come up with my own lore, I love it. Like
Oh,
I,
same.
I love going into that. But if I'm writing for someone else's system and I get to like flesh something out, I'm always so worried about like how much am I allowed to say? Like I'm gonna draw from the stuff that you've written, but like how far can I push your lore before the person in charge is going to be like, no, that's not how this works.
Or I'm going to change some thing that might seem innocuous and then it is actually a huge deal because of this tangential thing over here that I had no idea about because my research was just here. And
Hopefully your editor or your project lead would catch that though.
yeah,
One
that's
hopes.
true. But you never know. You never know. And
Yeah.
I don't know, it's something that I'm always, I guess, more self-conscious than anything about. So,
Yeah. I I also got into gaming late, and I'm kind of overwhelmed when I join a new team who knows like the deep lore of
yeah.
everything. Um because I just pull things out of a hat. Like if I'm hired to be in a project, obviously I learn the lore what I can of it. But for some things, like there's so much Warhammer lore.
Novels, games, video
There's so much
games,
D&D lore. Like y'all, there's a lot there.
and so much of it has been like retconned and then redone and then unretconned, and it's hard to keep track.
So what I have done, and I've done this mostly with OGL stuff, so like you're allowed to say whatever you want. But because I hate having people yell at me for messing with like fanboys who are like, you misspelled Faerun, you dropped the umlaut for Faerun, or something because I missed a thing. I got in the habit for a lot of my supplements of writing them in a character's voice, so it's just their impression. And
I
I
like
think
that.
I get why 5e is doing that a lot now.
There's just so much. There's just so much. Yeah.
So, Next question from Margaret Maynard, who we played with in Princesses Save Dragons and is also an
Yes.
Uncaged author. Sent in, what tips do you have for cluing in players that their characters are out of their depth and should probably run?
Yeah. So I was thinking a lot about this because as a DM, I have players who like to just jump the shark and jump into things that maybe they shouldn't decide to tackle yet, but it's fine. It's fine. I think all DMs and GMs know exactly the feeling.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so I was thinking about this as a writer for giving a DM or GM tips in the writing. Paint some evocative imagery. Say there's bodies everywhere. Give some legend of some ancient thing. Sprinkle in those little details. Um,
Yeah.
Obviously, in the moment, that won't help, but maybe then they won't get to that moment.
Yeah, and sometimes even just uh have seeing other NPCs fail if the NPC is more powerful than they are. Like, one thing that you can do from a writing perspective is like give them a really tough fight. Maybe right off the jump, maybe later on. Um, Whether or not the thing they're fighting survives. Like maybe they kill the thing and they barely survive or whatever. But it's make sure that it's a tough thing. If you want them to then be very afraid to face something else, show another like it doesn't work if it's people, right? But like give them a tough monster, non-sentient monster to fight. And then later, maybe in the same place, they find a bigger version of that monster, just like ripped to pieces and dead.
Love that.
You know, like that's and they might find tracks or they might hear something behind you, but that is a like there is something here that you can probably not defeat. You need help.
I think something, I love that. I love that. I
Uh
want to add to that actually,
Go for it.
because this is one of my favorite ways to do two things. One, warn people that they're in over their head, and two, drop some sweet loot because I love loot. It's great. Um, have them find something on a body in a cavern. The body is, you know, in horrible condition, but it has on like a magic breastplate. Wow, whoever wore this must be really powerful, and they're dead. Oh, now I can't hear you.
You know why? Because I hit my mute button. um, no, I love that though, especially if it's like a perioperative wound closure type thing, right? Or it's something where it's
Oh,
like
yeah.
something that should be keeping them alive and they're dead and it just like didn't friggin' matter.
That is the biggest, like, something here is not right.
Yeah. Um, Also, and I don't like this one, but sometimes from a DM perspective, you just kind of have to tell them. Like if they're going to go fight a god, they might fail. Another way from a writing perspective to do this, actually, the Threeflings just encountered this. It seemed like they were about to pick a fight with Lolth, and they did not even encounter Lolth. They just encountered evidence of Lolth. So maybe, you know, if they're angling for a fight that's over their head, um, just give them evidence of the thing. But I don't know. It can be kind of unsatisfying to never let them fight the big bad. But also, if you're like a level 4 character and you're like, I'm gonna go kill God, like, you'd have to level up the JRPG protagonist. It's not your time yet.
And you can also, like, if they really want to fight a god, cool. 12 levels later,
Yeah,
Balth remembers what you did in level 4, and she's
exactly.
pissed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Our client asked, how much information do you provide about NPCs? Ooh, we might have different ideas about this, actually. My ideas have changed dramatically since I started writing Uncaged.
Yeah, mine have too, actually.
Really?
Yeah, yeah. My NPC in my Uncaged adventure, a lot of my playtesters murdered her.
Oh my gosh, we
Sweet little
loved
old lady in the
her.
tree. Yeah, a lot of people just straight up murdered her. I know. How dare.
How dare the Threeves not only loved her, they like found her a husband. They like made me make up a man out of whole cloth to marry her off to.
Yes. She's just, yeah. I don't know. I think it depends on what you. I guess you can't really decide what you want for the NPC.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. What are your thoughts? How have they changed?
So, one thing I really like actually comes from a lot of indie games, like Mothership does this really well. And as much as we love our NPCs, they're like our little personal touch, our little people in the game. They're mechanics. Like, they're a way to get something done. They're a way to make the players feel things, or they're a way to get you somewhere. They're they're a tool. And so just give them a name, give them pronouns, a brief physical description, and then say maybe like a general demeanor, but honestly, what they want, what they need, and then something that they fear or hate, basically. And you can extrapolate pretty much anything from that.
I really like what they fear and what they hate. That's
Yeah.
really cool.
Like, and that might never come up, especially if, the players never really interact with them, but like what the NPC wants or what they can offer, like, like what their job is, what they know. I've seen it done like what they know and what their secret is, kind of thing. But I prefer like what they hate or fear because I think it has more of a punch. and
Yeah.
and I think it's less esoteric than like the bonds, ideals, flaws. It's just like, how are they going to interact? Well, this person wants a thing. They might have an overarching plot or a thing that they need. Like, I do this with hags all the time. Like what the hag says she wants, and then what she actually wants, and then the one thing that she absolutely does not want to happen.
Yeah. And then that could help you inform if someone wants to make a hag pact with her too.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it informs like if you know the point of no return with this NPC, like what's something the players could do that will make them be like, absolutely not. I'm no longer interacting with you. Because I think a lot of times we let NPCs just kind of hang around because we want our players to have choices and ignore the idea that like they can get that information from anywhere. If they piss off an NPC, let them piss off an NPC. They can get like a letter or see a sign or find animal tracks or meet another NPC who is more amenable to their attitude.
Yeah. I love the hook system. I really do. The hook and the lure from games like Monster Hearts,
Mm-hmm.
where there's something. If you do it, then that's it. That NPC is gonna be like all about you or your party, and then that gives maybe some personal connection happening as well. So I guess that is just something they want. So
Yeah, Urban Shadows 2 does a thing with that with like debts, which
mm-hmm.
Urban Shadows is all about debts, but it's like basically how you can push or pull on your relationship with an NPC or with each other to get them to do something for you, which is another way to do it. Urban Shadows, at least right now in the quick start, doesn't have any really pre-gen NPCs. It just says like a name and what their job is. And then the players can look at that person and say like, oh yeah, this person owes me 2 debts because they interfered with my life in some way. But that's another way to go about doing it. I like when I'm running games to know like the three things: what they want, need, and what is their like point of telling the players to fuck off.
Yeah, I like that. I like that point. I'm gonna steal that.
Ah, let's see. Kishmu has asked, speaking of remembering things 12 levels later, any tips for GM notes?
I'm all about the spreadsheets. I love a
Ooh.
spreadsheet with multiple tabs for every session. And then you can search in your spreadsheet for hooks and things and little notes. Um, and you can always have a session 0 reference right there that you can share or refer to. And it's really helpful for prep to, check that session 0 and then go, what did they do last time? What did they do three sessions ago? Have a spot for NPCs, and then leave little notes for yourself if you want to follow up with some, I don't want to say consequences because that sounds punitive, but plot twists or things.
You are so much more organized than I am. I have this lovely notebook. You have probably seen me writing down initiative in it, but like this is my GM notes. So it's just a bunch of nonsense that I take during session and sometimes after session. And if I have an idea, I will put it in there. It is primarily full of NPC names because otherwise I forget them. The ones that I invent during session. And a brief description of who they are. And what I just showed was from Paws and Claws, and I think there's a bunch of scratched out NPCs in there because Cameron's character killed almost all of my NPCs. But yeah, I also, one big thing that I do for running trad games is because I cannot remember spells to save my life, and I found that a lot of players cannot remember their spells. If I am running an adventure where I know a monster is going to have spells, I will put tabs out for every single spell that they might use. And that is the kind of prep that I will do. Because that just helps things go faster. But yeah, that's my prep. And yeah, that's about it. I'm a bad prepper. I am like... I make shit up as I go along. That's how I run games. That's my secret. I am maybe like 10% prep. When I first started, I had actual flowcharts of every possible way I thought the game could go and little alternatives for all of it. And I played with players who could not be contained, and I stopped doing that after about 3 sessions.
Players that cannot be contained make you creative like nothing else. And that's why we love them.
It's true. And it definitely makes you think on the fly. So, Paul. Let's see. We had another question, and it was the one we were avoiding, so it was from Kat. So from Perpetual Gloom, yes. What is the best way to make players really feel things, good and bad? So I was just talking about this with Panda Theist on Twitter yesterday, actually, and they were talking about how I have not played TTRPG, but they were talking about how TTRPG has you make characters as children and answer a whole bunch of questions about their childhood, and then take that same character and you say like where they are now using the childhood character. And go from there. And a lot of it you end up drawing from yourself, and it seems like that's the intention. Not that every time you feel things, it has to be personal and related to bleed, but I would say that's definitely an effective way to do it. Bluebeard's Bride is the same way. It even says in the text, like, the object of this game is not to scare the character, but to scare the players. So I think if you can tie it into something going, so bad. I'm gonna be like, if you can make the players like hit them where it's personal, that's a way to do it. That's much easier as a GM because you know your players and you know their character's background. But as a writer, if you build in mechanics where maybe they are going to be making bonds or they actually get more invested in creating a life path, you know, or answer questions or create bonds with each other as opposed to just saying, like, yes, pick from these 5 backgrounds and these are the skills that you get. Now go. Right? Actually, like, bringing in player investment will then lead to bringing in player investment leads to invested players. But yeah, that's kind of, yes. And Tyler brings up an excellent point. With consent, please always use safety tools. Session 0 is important. The X card is super important. And I can link the TTRPG safety toolkit down in the chat while Kristina answers that question.
Well, I think my answer is going to be fairly similar, is make sure your players want to feel those things, and they will tell you how to make them feel those things in how they interact with the world. So as a writer, you want to give them lots of options to interact with the parts of the world that they want to interact with. Something I like to do as a GM and as a writer, again, is give them something to care about right off the bat. It could be a place, it could be an NPC, it could be, so often like a long-term adventure, the goal is so massive, it's really hard to really kind of care about that goal. And you're like, well, you know, instead of fighting God, I think I'm going to go save the baker from financial ruin. Okay, cool. You give them a house by the bakers so they can always go talk to the baker. And maybe one of them falls in love with the baker. And then you've got this solid bond with a place and a person. And then you can do things with that bond.
Yeah, I love that. And I think also, from more of a writer standpoint, but also if you're running a game, uh, know that, or remember that not every game is for everyone. Like, you might write a game and not everybody wants to play it, or not everybody wants to play it right now. And even if you're like a DM or a GM or a storyteller, master of ceremonies, whatever, and you're so excited to play this game and you bring it to your players at session 0 and they're like, wow, that's bleak, I don't want to play that. Or, well, that seems really fluffy, I want to like get into the darkness of my soul. You don't need to be mad at them for that. You can play the game you want to play with some other people. Like, it's okay that not every game is for everybody. That's actually a good thing.
Variety is the spice of life.
Yeah. And consent is huge because you need, I mean, if you want to make your players feel things, or as a player you want to feel things, before any of that can happen, you need to make sure that you feel safe at the table.
And I will say, as someone who loves horror and loves writing horror, you can be more horrific the more people are safe.
Yeah, absolutely.
And yeah, you can go harder, you can get wilder. Yeah. And people will come back for more if they feel safe.
Yeah, that's, I can't promote safety tools enough, honestly. Um, let's talk about making or helping players feel good things. I think making
Mm.
success matter is a big one.
Mm. Hmm.
And also having reward. I mean, this is, I'm about to say the same thing twice, but giving them rewards that are meaningful are a part of it. Like, if your players want to befriend all of the monsters, if you're only giving them XP for killing the monsters, they're probably not going to be having a great time with their choices. So, again, this is something that comes out during session 0. But, like, write in your game what success is, and maybe even alternative ways to achieve success for, like, hacks of your game for people who want to play it in a slightly different way. What do you think?
I think it just comes back to the letting people have options.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, and letting the players drive a little bit in asking what they're excited about. Um, I know we keep talking about safety tools, but I love Stars and Wishes.
Same. That's my favorite aftercare one.
I love it so much, and it actually helps me more with prepping a game than anything else because your players just tell you what they want. And so you're not spending a ton of time preparing this giant fight that they're just going to walk right around or skirt or whatever. So, yeah, be communicative, be open. Um, yeah, not sure how to tie this to a writing tip, but talk to your players. Oh my gosh.
I mean, for that, I guess if you're teach people how to run your game and tell them to talk to the players.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, and even in D&D, that's the thing that a lot of people seem to ignore is where it says, like, this is a book of rules, but ultimately it's your table and you make your own rules. If
I think
any of
there are still ways you can surprise people. I know everyone wants to have the gasp reveal moment.
Mhm.
It's also really fun to give that to the players as well. I've been playing a lot of Pasión de las Pasiones, which is based on a
Yes.
telenovela. And I will have, during the game, players send me private messages saying, can I reveal that this? And it's something I would have never thought of. Yes, absolutely, you can reveal that. And there is a flashback mechanic in the game where you get to reveal an astonishing secret, and it gives that agency then to the player to be like, oh, but did you know? Anyway, it's a good mechanic.
That game is so fun. I love flashback mechanics. Like, for that one, and there's one in Blades in the Dark too, but Blades in the Dark is more like, how did you plan this heist now that you were in the heist? What did you do? But I love it. I just, yeah, and I love anything that gives players agency like that. There's so many cool, I mean, it's a mechanic. There's so many cool mechanical things you can do. I just played Alice is Missing for the second time recently, and that's one that's so structured, right? But also, players have so much agency because, like, if you don't know Alice is Missing, it's, I highly recommend it. But it's a silent role playing game, and you are all friends in a town who, or relatives who, were connected in some way to Alice, who has gone missing. She's usually like 16 or 17. And the game is 80 minutes. And you can play like on Discord and on Roll20, but you reveal cards at various times. And the cards will tell you what to do. But you get full freedom in there. So, like, I most recently drew a card that was like, you see something online, shuffle the suspect deck and draw it. That's the culprit. You see something online that confirms that this is the culprit to you. In 15 minutes, send one of the other players a terrifying or a bone-chilling text message from them, kind of thing. So, like, there's a structure there, but also that was all on me to figure out, like, what messed up thing did they say? And what did I see that confirmed it, you know?
I love that. I love collaborative games like that. I mean, it seems it is collaborative. It's collaborative.
Yeah. I really recommend that game. Even if you just go onto YouTube and, like, listen to the soundtrack that goes with the game, it's great. There's really good music. If anybody in chat has any questions on writing, or for Kristina, who was awesome for hanging out, drop them in, because we'll be here. Ooh. Penhat is talking about an Argentinian game. If you fail a roll, you can burn a related mythos to change the results. That's cool. I like games that have a mechanic like that.
I'm gonna copy and paste, and I'm gonna go find this game because that sounds awesome.
Kristina, can you say the name of the game so I don't butcher Spanish?
That is an assumption that I am not going to butcher this, but it's Cultos Innumerables.
Okay.
Innumerables. There we go.
I thought you spoke Spanish. Sorry, I wouldn't have made you do that.
No, it's okay. I know enough to get into trouble and out of trouble.
I speak Italian, and I get made fun of for speaking Spanish with an Italian accent all the time.
I mean, yeah. I've got an accent too.
Yeah, that reminds me of, like, the Warhammer Fantasy game has where it's Fate and Fortune, where if you fail a roll, you can use a fate point or a fortune point to re-roll it, kind of thing, or do a couple other things. Fate is much harder to get back, and you only use it in dire circumstances, but you can say, like, that didn't hit me, but I'm gonna die next turn, or, like, yes, that did hit me, I'm probably going to die, but I'm gonna go out in an epic way. And she was like, how you go out epically, which is pretty cool.
I love that. I love fail forward mechanics. I'm not thinking of collaborative games, but like belonging outside games.
Yeah.
Where maybe your playbook has something that can just be like, no, that didn't happen. This happened instead. Mm-hmm. But you have to use up your strong move to do it. So.
Yeah.
So many good games. This is becoming a games recommendation stream,
yeah,
and I'm totally okay with that too.
Ooh, speaking of games, I get to start running Avatar for Magpie next month. I'm so excited.
Oh my gosh.
I haven't seen it yet, but it is on my schedule. I'm going to be running the new Avatar game next month.
I will be in your signups ASAP.
I think everybody's going to be running Avatar.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
But yeah, I am really excited for that one. Every time we get an announcement about Avatar, I like spamming it with Appa gifts.
Yes. I just want to be a cabbage man.
Yes!
That's all I want.
I haven't seen the game yet, but if there is not a way to play as a cabbage merchant, I might write it.
That would be amazing.
There will be a cabbage merchant in my game. If I have
Always.
to force it in with a crowbar.
Oh, I love that.
Well, I don't see any other questions in here. Oh, there is one. Thanks, Penhat.
Downtime.
How do you do downtime between adventures? Ooh, for me that really varies based on the game. Because some games, like Warhammer Fantasy and Age of Sigmar Soulbound, which is also a Warhammer game, have downtime built in. So there's like activities that you can do to advance your character. For stuff like Pugmire, though, I kind of typically met with my players and I was like, okay, that was like this arc. The next arc is going to be, I think the first one was like 6 weeks later. So what would you have done during 6 weeks? and like who would you have connected with, what letters would you have written, and then had the players tell me what they would have done and where they would be. And then we did another session 0 to plan like the next little season together. We were calling it a session 1.5, and then kind of go from there. What about you?
God, most of my players love downtime and love to roleplay. Um, or sometimes we will just talk it out in like a group chat. But I think downtime is a great place to do a level. And something my DM did that I really loved was when we leveled at a particularly large level, I think it was 12, um, he asked for like reasons why our ASI went up. We were playing D&D. Why did your character become stronger? What was she doing that made her stronger? And then that gave me this, this really cool like side story of my character joining the city watch. And it was neat. Like, it's a cool place to do a little bit of little character development there. So
I love that.
yeah.
Yeah, on Three Flings, since Ophelia is packed to the tome, when she levels, she can get spells from other schools of magic. Basically, whenever Ink can't play, that's when Ophelia is going to see another magic user to like study. Well, then we like hash that out a little bit. Like, what did Ophelia learn? Where did she go? Who is she studying with?
So I have a question, a follow-up question on that.
Heck
Um,
yeah.
Handling player absence. This is now a DM tip stream.
Ooh.
Player absences. What do you like to do?
So it depends. There's a difference between on a streamed game versus a home game. With a streamed game, if I have more than one player, I will go forward. And sometimes even if I have like one, we'll just do a talking stream because there's an audience and you want to keep them with expectations. Unless I am too physically ill to make it. Like that's when I cancel streams, is when I am dying. But with home games, yeah, players sometimes. Oh, and sorry, I didn't even answer how I handle it. Usually ask them, like, what were they doing during that time? But with the nature of a stream, like, you don't really often have times to explain it. They just pop back in and are like, I was here and I did this. With a home game, you get a lot more liberty. And there's Ashley May wrote a really great book if you're running D&D that's called I Had to Go Because, if you're struggling to think of what your character did and you just like roll your character's background or their class or whatever, and it gives you a bunch of different options of like where you went and why based on a couple things that you can use if you're struggling in a pinch, or if you, the DM, just have a no-show player and you're like, they are there, which I think is cool. Generally, with a home game, I ask the player if they want me to zombie their character or not. Like, for those, basically, if they want another player to take control of their player, which means that they can still take damage. They might die. They get half experience kind of thing if it's an experience point system, which I like don't do anyway. Or if they just want to be like invisible in the background and then they're not in danger and they don't they wouldn't get XP if that was a thing. What about you?
So a couple of my games are kind of monthly drop in, drop out
Mm-hmm.
games. And I just kind of level folks along with. Sometimes I have years where people don't show and then suddenly, boom, they're back. So again, it depends on the game, it depends on the group, but I do love finding a reason for them to be gone and maybe tie that to something that might be coming up for the players to get them hooked right back in. Again, that sweet, sweet motivation.
Yeah. I think I appreciate when there is, like, if a player knows that they're going to be in and out, if they make a character that is easy to take in and out. Like, when Honey and Dice first joined the Pugmire show, Paws and Claws, she intentionally made a character who kind of like blows with the wind. So she could just kind of vanish and do her own thing, and then she would come back because Eartha was always moving and shaking and meeting people. And that worked really, really well. It's kind of become a joke in Three Flings that Ophelia just gets lost. Because, Ink's in college and sometimes has like school and other stuff going on. So, sometimes Ophelia just wanders off and then she catches up with us later. Sometimes she's learned something. Sometimes she has a new friend, but generally she stays safe. And those are instances where we just like remove, like the character was not there. But I know some of my players want their character to be there along and like know all of the information, just not to be like in danger.
Yeah. I would say there's another place where you could put a plot hook where you didn't want to give it to an NPC in your
Yeah.
writing, is give it to a player that was away last session. Maybe they heard a rumor.
Yeah.
Cool.
That is a fun way to do it. Like maybe they come back for the next thing.
Yeah, and then it gives them a big reason to hook back up with the group.
Yeah. Um I did have a friend who, this was not a game I was running, but I was playing in it, and we had a friend who was our another player who at last minute had to no show and said like, it's okay, just like zombie me, I'll keep you guys safe, because he was our fighter. And it was Warhammer Fantasy, and he was keeping us very safe, and we were texting him like, you're doing great, you're the best. And then he lost an arm and we were like, are you right or left-handed? And he was like, what? We're like, it's okay, you did great, buddy. So and then it worked out with his character. He has like a nice I think he has a hook arm now, but a nice prosthetic.
Sweet.
Yeah. For like level 2 or whatever Warhammer, it's not like leveled like that, but for like really low Warhammer Fantasy characters, it's pretty baller.
Yeah.
Penat wants to know, what is the most important non-essential thing to prep before a session? So not like monsters and magic and stuff. I want to make sure everybody's going to show up, but I think that's essential. Yeah, I keep thinking like snacks, water.
I don't know. I would consider snacks essential.
Yeah.
But that's me.
I have Pocky right next to me.
Excellent.
Honestly, it's gonna sound weird, but I want to make sure that I'm in like a good mood to run a game. And I want to make sure that everybody else is like fed and in the mood to play. Because if people are really distracted or hungry or anxious, there's going to be some weird stuff going on at the table. So for me, the most important, like, non-mechanically game-related essential thing to prep is just the vibe. Is that weird?
No, absolutely not. I was gonna say getting into the like mood by like listening to some music or just taking a moment. But yeah, because looking back at notes, looking back at session 0 is always a good thing to do. But I would also kind of say that's kind of essential as well, to remind yourself. God, thinking about how you want the session to end. I know it's really looking quite far ahead, and as we know, game sessions can be anything, but even just a general vibe of how you want your session to end. Do you want it to be cliffhanger? Do you want it to be something a little more chill? Yeah.
I love that. I usually end on a cliffhanger when I'm not running Three Flings, which obviously ends with like a nice conclusion every week. But I'm usually like, big moment. Bye.
It's the best. I crave it. It feeds me. I love that.
But I also love after like a huge thing when like players connect and they get into that downtime and they're just having like a nice little thing. Now, I usually run that too because I'll be like, and then you hear something right behind you. You can see it next week. Because I'm a monster. You've played in my games, you know.
I love cliffhangers. I'm always here for it. I do like the nice cozy, because sometimes you just want to like wrap in a blanket and eat bread. So
that sounds amazing.
But I think that, that's also another thing of checking in with your players, seeing what kind of vibe do they need tonight.
Yeah. I think that's really nice. Well, if there aren't more questions, we got a little bit of a late start because I forgot how technology works. But I think we're gonna call it for the night. How are you feeling?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we should leave them on a cliffhanger though. What have you got coming up?
Oh. Putting me on the spot. Oh, Three Flings Friday. Hey, join us for Three Flings on Friday. I hate answering this because I have so many unpublished things that I just don't know when they're coming out. And as soon as I know a date, I will tell y'all. So, just follow my Twitter and I will tell you when I have a thing. I've got stuff coming out for Cubicle 7 and I've got stuff coming out to the DMs Guild someday. What about you?
I also have stuff coming out to the DMs Guild someday. You can find other games of mine over on itch.
And right over my shoulder.
Oh yeah, and over your shoulder too. And yeah, I'm over there on itch as Xtina Smash, so you can find that there. And yeah.
All right, friends. Well, thank you so much for joining us. We are going to go raid Dicey Amazons, see what's going on with them. So, thank you. And come back on Friday because Sonia's guesting with Three Flings, and it's going to be a blast.
Yeah.
And if you have any if you have any follow-up questions, message us on Twitter because, we're around. Have a great night, everybody.
Good night. Thank you.
Bye. I really should have put a goodbye screen on here. Now I just have to sit and wait for the raid.
Well, we are raiding.
All right, let's go. Bye.